The night began like every other carefully choreographed late-night segment, with Jimmy Kimmel wearing his usual smirk and Justin Timberlake walking out to thunderous applause, dressed sharp, flashing that trademark grin that had carried him through decades of superstardom, from the bubblegum pop days of NSYNC to his solo music dominance, acting gigs, and SNL antics. But behind his polished walk and confident wave, there was tension tightening in his jaw, subtle but there, invisible to the audience that only saw the persona and not the man struggling with the slow decay of his once pristine public image. Timberlake had agreed to appear on Jimmy Kimmel Live, not just to promote a surprise single, but to subtly course-correct the wave of negative press following a string of awkward interviews, online backlash over past relationships, and viral speculation about everything from his marriage to Jessica Biel to fan fatigue over his perceived evasiveness. The segment started light, with a few softballs about the studio process, a joke about dad life, and a humorous clip of Justin attempting TikTok dances with his kids. Cue the laughter, cue the charm. But then Jimmy, always comfortable skating that dangerous edge between playful roast and biting mockery, pivoted toward a topic Timberlake clearly hadn't been fully briefed on. A joke-laden montage of public, oops, moments from his career, including his infamous 2004 Super Bowl performance with Janet Jackson, followed by crowd-laughing cuts to more recent fan criticism over lyrics called tone-deaf, and clips from interviews where he seemed dismissive or defensive. Timberlake tried to laugh along at first, but you could see the smile fade, not suddenly, but like a light dimming from within, as Jimmy leaned into it, tossing in barbed jokes about apology fatigue, and the last pop star still trying to be cool at 40, punctuated with that all-too-familiar faux-friendly tone that made the studio audience roar while Timberlake sat quietly simmering. Jimmy, sensing the discomfort but pushing anyway, perhaps misreading the moment or perhaps driven by the rush of audience reaction, asked, "So Justin, when did you officially decide to become the guy who can't take a joke anymore?" And that was it. Timberlake's smile disappeared completely, his brow furrowed, and what followed was not a celebrity meltdown in the traditional sense, but a controlled detonation, a man so used to the polite rhythms of showbiz suddenly refusing to keep dancing. "Is this really what we're doing tonight?" he said, voice low but shaking with emotion, sitting back in his chair and glaring across the desk with years of media frustration boiling behind his eyes. The audience laughed, awkwardly, hesitantly, unsure if this was scripted. "You invited me here to humiliate me on camera," he continued, not shouting but slicing, calling out Jimmy not as a comedian, not even as a host, but as a longtime acquaintance who had, in Timberlake's eyes, chosen public cruelty over private respect. Kimmel attempted to deflect, suggesting they were just having fun, but Timberlake wasn't having it. He referenced years of loyalty, of friendship, of doing favors for the show, of pretending to laugh at digs he never found funny, of grinning through manufactured scandals while everyone feasted on his silence. Then came the moment no one expected. Timberlake removed his earpiece, muttered, "I'm done," and stood up mid-segment, his mic still hot enough to catch the sharp breath he took before storming off stage, leaving Jimmy in stunned silence and the audience erupting into a chaos of gasps, applause, and confused laughter that didn't know whether to celebrate or recoil from what had just unfolded live on national television. Backstage turned into a frenzy of panicked staffers, confused producers, and wide-eyed interns scrambling to understand whether the walkout was a bit gone wrong or a PR disaster in real time, while Justin, furious and unspeaking, paced the hallway before disappearing into the green room, slamming the door shut. Publicists hovered outside, whispering into phones, while Kimmel sat at his desk in a daze, attempting to salvage the segment with a joke about guessing Justin won't be joining us for the after-party, but it landed with a thud, the mood of the room punctured beyond repair. News broke within minutes, clips spread like wildfire across X, TikTok, YouTube, every camera angle of Justin's exit dissected by amateur lip readers and reaction commentators. Some fans were shocked, others thrilled by the raw authenticity of it, and others said it was long overdue, that maybe Timberlake had needed to snap in order to finally shed the over-rehearsed, unshakable, nice guy facade that had grown brittle over the years. Meanwhile, entertainment journalists and online culture critics dove deep, revisiting years of interviews and offhand remarks where Timberlake had either dodged accountability or weaponized charm as a shield from scrutiny. Suddenly, people were talking again, not just about the walk-off but about what it said about media culture, about the endless expectation that celebrities must turn vulnerability into punchlines, and whether Timberlake was melting down, or waking up. In private, Justin issued no apology, no follow-up, no PR cleansed tweet. He remained silent for 3 days. Then, without announcement, he uploaded a video to his social media, not polished, not cut, just a single shot of him in a plain room, speaking plainly. He explained that he wasn't angry because of a joke, but because of the years of deflection he'd allowed, the public beatdowns he'd absorbed for things he didn't understand at the time, and as Timberlake's impromptu monologue continued to ripple across the digital world, his words, unscripted, unfinished, and uncomfortably sincere, became a lightning rod that fractured his fanbase in the entertainment industry into camps, drawing fierce lines between those who saw his televised walkout as a self-absorbed tantrum and those who saw it as a long-suppressed rebellion against the synthetic demands of celebrity compliance. Social media became an arena of war, with thousands dissecting his every sentence, mining past footage for context, debating whether Justin had been unfairly provoked or had simply lost control after years of dodging difficult questions under the veil of charisma. Meanwhile, Jimmy Kimmel remained conspicuously quiet, issuing a single tweet that read, "Last night didn't go how any of us planned. We're listening. That's all for now," an ambiguous statement that critics slammed as hollow damage control while defenders praised it as professional restraint. But in private, sources from within the show revealed that the fallout had rattled Jimmy more than anyone expected, not because he feared public backlash, but because he genuinely hadn't seen the emotional weight behind the jokes, hadn't anticipated that Timberlake, usually the master of cool detachment, would finally snap. Timberlake's team fielded dozens of interview requests from major networks and high-profile podcasters, all hungry for an exclusive sit-down, but he declined every one, instead scheduling a surprise appearance not with a traditional outlet, but with a small, trauma-focused YouTube podcast run by a therapist whose platform centered on navigating identity under public pressure. That interview, raw and unfiltered, was less about Timberlake's career and more about his internal landscape, the confusion of living as both a product and a person, the exhaustion of smiling through decades of press cycles while constantly wondering whether he was the joke or the punchline. He spoke about the early days of fame, how being the golden boy of a boy band came with expectations of infallibility, how being charming became a defense mechanism, and how the collapse of his public image over the years had forced him to confront parts of himself he had kept buried under performance. Viewers were stunned, not by tears or drama, but by the absolute stillness of his tone, the maturity of someone who had been chewed up by fame and finally decided he didn't need to be digested by it. The video reached 10 million views in 24 hours, with comments flooded by fans and skeptics alike who admitted, despite biases, that they had never heard him speak like this before. This wasn't a press junket or a brand reset, this was a man rebuilding himself sentence by sentence. And while critics still questioned his timing, his sincerity, and whether this was just the next evolution of Timberlake's image, a quieter majority started doing something rare in celebrity culture: they listened. In the weeks that followed, Timberlake's fallout with Kimmel snowballed into an inflection point in the entertainment industry, with agents, producers, and publicists across Los Angeles suddenly re-evaluating the nature of the bit, how many jokes at a guest's expense were too many, how often boundaries were pushed for clicks, and whether the very idea of late night as a safe, laughing space had become outdated in an age where vulnerability and mental health couldn't be neatly folded into 3-minute segments between commercial breaks. Former guests came forward, actors, musicians, athletes, recalling moments when they too had felt ambushed or reduced to caricature on talk shows, forced to laugh along to survive the segment while internally unraveling. Meanwhile, Timberlake's abrupt break from the mainstream didn't hurt his reputation the way his team feared, it reshaped it. He stopped doing red carpets. He canceled scheduled appearances. But his next song, titled Mute, dropped with no warning, no promo run, no teasers, just a piano-led, soul-drenched track released at midnight with a single piece of cover art, a mic lying on a late-night desk, unplugged. The lyrics were introspective, direct, and confessional, a sonic open letter to the versions of himself he had performed for others, and the response was seismic. Not just commercially, where it charted high despite no airplay, but emotionally, people listened not to bop, but to understand. It was no longer about hit singles, it was about a man reclaiming authorship of his story after years of being written by tabloids, managers, and hosts who saw him as content first, human second. Jimmy Kimmel, feeling the weight of public scrutiny, finally addressed the incident in a segment devoid of jokes, where he admitted to crossing a line, to not seeing the shift in Timberlake's demeanor, and to confusing proximity with permission. He said, "I thought I knew the man well enough to tease him. Turns out, I didn't even know how tired he was." That moment resonated, sincerity piercing through the usual satire, and while it didn't erase what had happened, it did set a new tone. Timberlake and Kimmel didn't reconcile publicly, and sources say they haven't spoken since, but the air around both changed. The next time a guest sat in that chair, the energy was different, not afraid, but aware. Timberlake, now seen less as a fallen star and more as a man finally refusing the choreography of fame, continued to evolve away from the spotlight. He was spotted doing songwriting workshops at public high schools, guest lecturing at Berkeley about the emotional cost of pop culture machinery, even co-producing a documentary about burnout in young musicians. What had started as a PR nightmare became something more profound. A cultural reckoning, a human being reclaiming his voice in the loudest way possible, not by yelling, but by walking away. And in that silence, in that absence, Timberlake had never sounded more alive.